You didn't change anything. Same meals, same portions, same level of activity. And somewhere in the last year or two, your body started responding differently. The weight came anyway, specifically around your abdomen. And nothing you've tried has moved it. The standard explanation is calories. Eat less, move more. And when that doesn't work, when you are already eating carefully and moving regularly, and the number on the scale climbs or simply refuses to shift, the implication is that you must be doing something wrong, miscounting, underestimating, not trying hard enough. That explanation is incomplete. And for many women, it's flatly wrong. What changes is not always the input. What changes is the hormonal environment that determines what your body does with that input. And once that environment shifts, the rules that used to work stop working. Not because you changed, but because the system underneath did. Here's what's actually happening. Insulin is the hormone most responsible for weight gain that doesn't respond to diet, and it is the one least discussed in the context of women's health. Insulin's job is to move glucose from the bloodstream into cells, where it can be used for energy. Every time you eat, insulin rises. That's normal. The problem begins when insulin stays elevated, chronically, structurally, because the cells have stopped responding to it efficiently. This is insulin resistance. When cells resist insulin's signal, glucose stays in the bloodstream longer. The pancreas responds by producing more insulin to compensate. And high insulin has one very specific effect on fat metabolism. It locks fat in storage. Elevated insulin is a direct signal to fat cells to hold on to what they have and accumulate more. Fat burning in a high insulin environment is physiologically suppressed. This is the mechanism behind weight that doesn't respond to caloric restriction. If you reduce calories, but insulin stays elevated because of refined carbohydrates, frequent eating, chronic stress, or disrupted sleep, the hormonal signal to store fat remains. You are eating less, and the body is still storing more because the instruction to store is coming from the hormonal environment, not from the calorie count. Insulin resistance is not a condition that only affects people with diabetes or obesity. It exists on a spectrum. It begins years before it shows up on standard blood tests, and it is significantly more common in women with PCOS, where it drives a specific pattern of abdominal weight gain, carbohydrate cravings, and fatigue after eating that is entirely distinct from ordinary hunger. The measurement that reveals early insulin resistance is fasting insulin, not just fasting glucose, not just HbA1c, but the actual level of insulin in the blood after an overnight fast. A fasting insulin above 10 is worth a conversation with your doctor. Most routine panels don't include it. You often have to ask specifically. Cortisol is the second hormonal driver, and it works in partnership with insulin in ways that compound the problem. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. One of its primary functions is to raise blood sugar, because in a threat response, your muscles need fuel fast. To do this, cortisol signals the liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream. Blood sugar rises, insulin follows. And if this happens repeatedly, through chronic stress rather than acute physical threat, you get a cycle of cortisol-driven blood sugar spikes followed by insulin-driven fat storage, without eating anything to cause it. Cortisol also directly promotes fat deposition in the abdomen. Abdominal fat cells have a higher density of cortisol receptors than fat cells elsewhere in the body. This is why chronic stress produces the specific apple-shaped redistribution, the waist that expands while the rest of the body doesn't change proportionally. The fat isn't random. It's going exactly where cortisol is directing it. And here's the part that makes this genuinely difficult to address. The standard response to unexplained weight gain is to restrict calories more aggressively. Aggressive caloric restriction is a physiological stressor. It raises cortisol. Higher cortisol raises insulin. Higher insulin blocks fat loss. The effort to fix the problem activates the very hormonal mechanism that causes it. This is not a willpower paradox. It's a cortisol-insulin feedback loop. And it explains why women who are working harder than anyone around them to manage their weight are sometimes the ones making the least progress. Estrogen is the third piece, and its role in weight distribution is one of the most direct hormonal effects on body composition that exists. Throughout the reproductive years, estrogen promotes fat storage in the hips, thighs, and buttocks, subcutaneous fat that sits under the skin and is metabolically relatively inert. This is the pear-shaped distribution typical of the reproductive years, and while it may feel cosmetically unwelcome, it is metabolically safer than abdominal fat. As estrogen declines, in perimenopause, after childbirth, or in cases of chronically low estrogen at any age, this fat distribution signal changes. The body shifts toward abdominal fat storage. The same woman, eating the same diet, gains weight in a different place because the hormonal instruction about where to put it has changed. Estrogen also supports insulin sensitivity. When estrogen is adequate, cells respond more efficiently to insulin. When estrogen declines, insulin sensitivity decreases, which connects directly back to the first driver. Low estrogen and insulin resistance are not separate problems in perimenopausal women. They are the same problem from two angles. There is also a relationship between estrogen and leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and satiety to the brain. Estrogen supports leptin sensitivity. When estrogen drops, leptin signaling becomes less efficient. The brain receives a weaker fullness signal. Hunger increases, not because you need more food, but because the hormonal translation of fullness is being lost in transit. This is why perimenopausal weight changes so often feel like a different relationship with food. More hunger, less satisfaction, cravings that weren't there before, when the food itself hasn't changed. Here's what connects all three. Insulin drives fat storage directly. Cortisol drives insulin and directs fat to the abdomen. Declining estrogen reduces insulin sensitivity and shifts fat distribution simultaneously. The three mechanisms don't just coexist, they reinforce each other. A woman under chronic stress, in perimenopause, with early insulin resistance, is dealing with all three drivers at once. And caloric restriction, in that context, addresses none of them. What actually moves the needle is different for each driver, but the common threads are consistent. Blood sugar stability matters more than calorie count. Protein adequacy supports insulin sensitivity and preserves muscle mass, which keeps resting metabolism higher. Resistance training is more effective than cardio for improving insulin response and shifting body composition. Sleep is not optional. It directly regulates cortisol, insulin, and hunger hormones overnight. And aggressive restriction makes all three drivers worse. Your body is not broken. It is responding rationally to a hormonal environment that has shifted. Understanding the shift is the first step to working with it instead of against it. The next video in this series takes a different angle on the same hormonal picture, one that affects mood, focus, and emotional stability in ways that are just as misattributed as the weight. Why your anxiety gets worse before your period, and why the explanation has nothing to do with stress and everything to do with a specific neurological withdrawal that happens every single month.